welcome back to the Sexy Business Podcast. I'm Spooky Dangerous, and joined with me, as always, is Lewd Neko,
Hello.
and who has outdressed me once again. I was told it was Casual Friday, but I must have read the calendar invite wrong. This is going to be a special recap filler episode. I'm kidding. I know how they always do it when they go back and look at their hot clips from the year, but it is important for us to do retrospectives and talk about all of the things that we've done to get us to this point, because we've been going for 8 months now, according to YouTube, which is pretty exciting. Usually, podcasts die well before this point, so it's a good sign that we've made it to this milestone, let's say. And I think we should look back at how everything came together, how everything brought us to this horrible, horrible place that we've created for ourselves. Do you want to kick us off with a little bit of how we got started?
Yeah, like if I'm remembering correctly, we basically had like a mutual acquaintance in the industry. I know like you had been thinking about doing the podcast first, and I was suggested as someone who would be good at co-hosting because I'm really good at talking about dumb shit for long periods of time.
Yeah. So
I'm
this
also like, yeah.
this person in particular was the writer for Cufflinks and Cages, Spice and Wolf, and he was to be the person on the podcast with me as a way to help promote Game 3, Cufflinks and Cages. And then he was like, I don't think I can handle that, but also here is a suggestion of a person that might do that really well. And then, because I had also floated the idea of it being a VTuber thing, and I was going to VTube for the first time. And he was like, well, here is a person that does that already. Maybe they can help out. I'm like, okay, let's see how it goes.
And I mean, I've wanted to do a podcast for a really long time because, like, that's like one of the very common, like, compliments I get is like, oh, like, you're really pleasant to listen to and you're really good at talking about things for like long periods of time. Because, like, what would often happen when I was streaming a lot more is like, literally, it was so easy to just get me going on tangents. Like, someone would just be like, hey, what's your opinion on this game? And I'd be like, hold on, let me pause the game. I'm putting the lovin's off and we're talking about my, like, aesthetic criticisms of some visual novel for 3 minutes.
Love vents
Um,
off, spiraling. Let's go. That's so funny.
but yeah.
Yeah, that was kind of
So,
how it kicked off, and I think we did okay. Like we started off with like a lore episode, which was just like a chill introducing us, kind of a thing, and then we were like, okay, let's start with some more assessment type things, right? Like we did a zone episode. We talked about some classic waifus, and we talked about the PayPal changes, right? And then after that, it was like, well, what if we actually just talked about some of the games in the space? And it was only after that that we like really started to talk and like play games and like talk and show off stuff, a bit more like a classic review kind of a thing. And so it's interesting to see how we've kind of evolved over time, looking at like the first half and the second half, because it wasn't until the second half when we started doing interviews and stuff. But we still have some of that same commentary stuff. We still are a bit more focused on playing a game and talking about it. But how do you feel about the show now that we're here?
yeah, there's definitely this sort of arc where, like, I feel like when we started off, we were doing a lot more of like businessy type of episodes, or we just like kind of talking about like, here are some broad trends, or like here's how you do this technical thing, and it does get like mixed responses. It really just depended on what the topic is, which makes sense. Most people, when they think entertainment, they don't think like discussions of like here's how you advertise a game in the erotic industry. And when we started doing more of like the interviews, or like even like the first interview we did for Food Dom World is like, I think,
Mm,
still one of the best videos.
it's our
It's
best video, yes.
Yeah, so people evidently prefer kind of game centric or like person who actually exists in the space interview type content. And doing those over the past couple of episodes, plus some interviews that we have lined up, things we have planned, things that maybe haven't released yet. Has been really fun. I think it's been a really great way to get perspective on just how many kinds of people are involved in this scene, right? It's not just like just game devs, but you also have to think about like, voice actors and writers and people who review these kinds of games or talk about these kinds of games or, cosplay and other kinds of erotic content. So it's been a lot of fun. And I'm also glad to give some like lesser known people in the scene kind of exposure because these are people who like I've known on like Twitter or have just seen in the space. And I'm like, yeah, these people deserve recognition because they're making really good content, but it's just hard to get any sort of recognition when your niche is our niche.
Yeah, and when you're in a niche within our niche, it's extra hard. But the other thing is that if you're in that kind of slice, right, this tiny market, the only real way that you can ever grow is by accidentally showing up in key tags or word of mouth, or whatever. Not very many people talk about their niche of a niche of a niche. But getting a chance to show up and collaborate with other people that occupy other spaces, people that are interested in a more generic thing might go, oh, wow, that's actually sick. I want to go and investigate this. And I think that's kind of the best ways to get discovered. Like working with a new artist that has like a specific branding or whatever, or working with a new person to co-stream with, or finding other people. And I think working together, especially in the NSFW space, is such a big deal. Like you see a lot of the OnlyFans models pop off a lot when they start getting a bunch of their friends together to do content together. Like Bishojo Mum does collabs almost exclusively now. I don't think she actually does that much solo content as a percentage compared to originally, because she just has so many people in the girl gang that are down to clown all the time. And it shows because you can see the overlap there, right? And you can see the results. And if you're an OnlyFans user and you're used to spending the money on one person's account and receiving one person's content, having other people show up must feel like a freebie or bonuses or something, right? Surely.
Yeah, and I mean even within like games, like erotic games, like seeing collaborations where it's like your favorite artist and your favorite writer team up, or like I think like Shady Lewd Cart, we interviewed
Mm.
Shades like a long time ago, but Shady Lewd Cart is literally like a huge collab of like so many different adult games. Like he just gets permission to borrow characters from them, and it's like such a fun little example of like I don't know collaboration in our community, and it makes me really happy and like oh we're all in this together.
Yeah, for sure. All right, what about some highlights from some of the previous episodes we've done? Is there anything in particular that stands out to you as some of the best we've done?
Ooh, best is like a different category. As far as like stuff I've really enjoyed, maybe stuff that hasn't been recognized as much. I actually really liked our Zone Tan episode.
Mm.
I really like talking about Zone. It was like one of our like first episodes, but like cuz like just Zone means so much to me cuz like it is like the kind of spider bite for me. Like that's I guess what kind of triggered everything else. So I really enjoyed getting to like revisit that content and see like what's still being posted, what people are talking about online in relation to Zone. I'm glad it still exists. It's like a cornerstone of the internet.
Yeah, I also like the fake out intro that I put with that, which had the intro of the Anka animation in it, which is kind of cool as well. And I think you're right. I think it is a good episode, and it maybe have been a little bit unappreciated, but also because it's right at the beginning of our catalog. I wonder what like the actual user trend is. Like, are people, because it's not like a sequential story. You don't need to watch it all in order. People are
Yeah.
obviously just going to be clicking on the episodes that they care about. Um, so it's interesting to see what kind of pops off, what kind of doesn't. For me, I really do like the interviews that we do. Some of them are people that I know, and I get a chance to ask them punchy questions, which I like. Like the Food on Mod one was really good. The Bishojo Mom one was really good. I got to ask about the stupid fucking Piccolo banner, which is a big highlight for me. But also like getting to meet and work with a whole bunch of new people. We have a whole bunch of people queued to come and do interviews as well, and like working with them and figuring out how to make that happen because we have to flatten them down and get them into a 2D space, which isn't as easy as it sounds. My steamroller isn't international just yet, and we're trying to work all that out. But that's something that I'm looking forward to I'm looking forward to. But there was one other funny thing that I think we should bring up, because we do have a lot of stuff. Like, we kind of pitch, right? We pitch to each other and we try and figure out what is going to be a good idea for an episode. Is it just going to be, hey, look, this person is free and we can record with them, or this game just came out. Like, we have a couple of games on our list that we kind of cycle through and go, now is it time to play this one, or are we going to go back and do this one, or whatever. So that we always have stuff kind of running. But there was one in particular that we recorded a whole, well, not really a whole episode, we recorded like 17 minutes of an episode and then was like, oh, yeah, this sucked. And it was an episode about the announcement for mods for Baldur's Gate 3, where the goal was to go through the mod listings and find all of the NSFW ones and kind of, I don't know, talk about what was funny there, but it had to be shown. Like, the fucking character models were just ridiculous. The like massive knockers mod, and they're just like so distended and just not a good shape, like just bloated and disproportionate, or like the hyper pregnant one, or like some of the weird garments and stuff. And it was just like, this hurts us to experience and look at it, and then we just have to verbally describe it to you, but we're somehow shielding you from seeing the horrible, awful thing, when really you need to see the horrible, awful thing to understand what's going on. It's a lot.
Yeah, and it was also just like, I think because it was so early in like modding being announced for Baldur's Gate, that like there just wasn't like a ton. I think there will probably be significantly more like now, if not even in like 6 months from now. And like modding, I think could be an interesting episode maybe for the future if we talked about just modding broadly, like Skyrim mods or like
Yeah.
Sims mods, where there's like a plethora. There's a lot to talk about there. I've never been big into NSFW modding myself, mostly because I have a potato right now, so it would explode. I think the closest I ever got is I tried to mod my Sims once, and it just like added a bunch of weird shit and fucked up a bunch of my stuff, and I had to just like hard reset all of it. But I've seen videos online. I've seen the people who basically make like straight up like full like storylines using like Skyrim, or even like stuff like VR chat or Second Life. I actually used to watch a lot of that back in the day.
I've played around with the Skyrim sex mods. I spent a lot of time just goofing around with Skyrim mods in general. But a lot of the Skyrim sex mods take a lot to make it work, because they have like they like require a script extender, they require a lot of prerequisite things to make it happen. Like the CBBE, which is the like Caliente bigger booties extension or some bullshit like that. And then whenever you look at any single Skyrim mod, it's like, this is required, this is required, this is required, and like you end up loading so many things that there's like clashes somewhere, or if something had outfits in it, it clashes with something else, or it's like just hard generally. And if the goal is to jerk your shit, the amount of investment required is a lot. It's just, I don't know if the juice is worth the squeeze in this particular scenario. But like you said, over time, things might develop and come out, which makes it become a bit more of an interesting conversation. And maybe we revisit it. Like, in theory, there's no bad ideas. Maybe there's just bad timing. Or we can talk about, like, even this episode, right? We get to talk about how horrible an idea it was. That's somehow become content in a way. So really nothing is wasted. And we have had a lot of older episodes where we have ventured into a topic in like because our episodes are 30 minutes long, we can't really do an insane deep dive into something, right? So we do have to kind of introduce something. We do have to kind of glaze over it in a way, which means that sometimes we don't get the opportunity to really truly explore a thing in the way that it deserves. And so maybe there is value to coming back and looking at some stuff. Like, we've done a bunch of generic episodes about like furries or monster fucking, and I'm sure there's plenty more space with lots of different just niches and interests where we talk about what the different things that make them attractive or whatever are. Surely there's like games that we've looked at that have had updates since then that we can come back and have a look at, and a lot of stuff like that. We did one parasocial episode, and I feel like we should do more parasocial episodes, even though it didn't perform very well. I feel like if you're going to watch more than one or two episodes of the show, getting to know us better has value to it, right? Surely.
Yeah, and I mean, I will also say, like, we do read comments, and so if you have something that you would really love us to talk about, or you have an idea, like, pitch it to us. I know, like, recently there was a comic suggesting, like, have you guys ever considered sort of talking about, like, adult games from more of like an academic perspective or like a more like kind of professional like way? And I thought that was interesting because I contributed to this adult games anthology. It was sort of a collection of like essays, like critically, I guess, thinking or writing about the adult game industry. And there's actually some really interesting stuff in there. I just wrote about basically my experience creating a community around adult game streaming. But maybe that'll end up being something we talk about where we get real fancy and we use big words.
Yeah, I do like the idea of us engaging with the content critically. But it's like an audience thing, right? Is our audience going to be coming to us looking for that? And so it's hard, right? Is it going to be something that we can do in 30 minutes and do it justice? Or is it something that we do a 30-minute episode and then see if people engage with it or not? Because if we make something and we get 100 comments on it, we're going to go, oh shit, people cared. And maybe we'll extend on this or we'll revisit this or whatever. Currently, a lot of the comments that we do get are pretty scattered across different things. And it's usually like someone chipping in with their 10 cents per episode. And yeah, like we do both go and read all of them. Often I'll go and reply to most things because I'm always curious about what people are thinking, right? Because everyone knows something I don't. That's kind of the worldview that I operate with. It would be insane for me to think that I know everything. And so when people suggest stuff, like part of that suggestion was a bunch of books for us to read, and we both kind of don't have enough time to devour a whole text and go through and do that kind of thing. Because even when we do the video game reviews for Flipwitch, I only got to play a couple hours, like 2 or 3 hours, and then you have the upside of that you can stream the game, and that like overlaps with the existing thing that you're doing.
Yeah, 2 for 1.
But like hot live stream, girl reads academic NSFW paper aloud to you and asks for your thoughts and feelings. I don't know if that hits the same. I don't know if I can jerk my shit to that. So it's kind of hard to be able to engage in that kind of media, right? Even though we did do an episode about written games, it didn't actually perform super well, which is kind of crazy because I know lots and lots of people have played Corruptions of Champions, Trials in Tainted Space, Corruptions of Champions 2. I know there's also other text-based games that are similar. But it feels like a lot of the games that do big, videos rather, that do big are like based on really big community type games. And even in that, it's hard to... Actually, while I'm bringing it up, let's do a little bit of a dive into analytics on the podcast. This is a thing that I care about a lot, and I spend too much fucking time looking at just numbers. Generally. Yeah, bigger number, better person, as they say. And our best performing episode is the interview with Bert for Foododon World. But nowhere in the title or thumbnail does it mention it's an interview with him, which I think is really interesting because we went back and did an episode that was about us playing the game and talking about the different routes and stuff like that, and it performed worse. It did about half as many views, even though both present exactly the same, right? But there's nothing to really tell you that one is different than the other. I think the main difference is that Bert did the interview and then shared it amongst other people in their Discord and stuff like that. And so people in the Discord were like, oh, here's in this episode, I should go and watch that. And the same goes for some of the other episodes. Like either we hit on trending with like a good keyword, or anything with food in the title seems to do slightly better than the other things, and stuff like that. or it gets shared somewhere by the creator, and that gives it a little bit of a boost. And that's why us collaborating with people is a bit relevant, because it is some of the ways where our episodes do a little bit better. But I did kind of want to do an overview because we've hit 205 subscribers. Yeah, I think yay is correct, because it's only been 8 months. Like, the channel wasn't open much before that, and even then it didn't really have anything on it. It just had 3 songs from THM games, right? As just like a placeholder of having something there. And so now with the podcast, we've managed to grow up to 205 subscribers in such a short time. I think is very impressive, actually. And so I'm kind of proud of us for that. And also, we have a total of 10,000 views, which means that if they're all unique, that we have a really low subscribe rate. But that's kind of ordinary, right? That's not that crazy. The other thing that I think is cool is that we have 87 videos and 205 subscribers, which is a really good ratio. That's like slightly greater than 2 subscribers per video. So if we wanted to get to 1,000 subscribers, we only need to make like 400 videos, and we'll get there. That's big thumbs up. I'm excited about that. 400 more episodes to come in the pipeline for sure. But we're currently at 37 episodes, which is most, I don't know if that's exactly 8 months or whatever. We also have, at the time of recording, like episodes in advance. We're always 2 or 3 episodes in advance. And I think at the moment we're going to be slightly more than that, because it's December and we understand people get busy. But 37 episodes, never missing a week, despite a whole bunch of different things happening, despite me being interstate, you being busy, work stuff, all that, and us never missing an episode, I think is very impressive. And it's not like one of us had to do an episode by ourselves to cover. We've both been in every single episode, which if you compare to stuff like the big Twitch streamer episode podcast like The Yard or Fear And, which I watch, Fear And never has the same combination of hosts among the 4 hosts that they have 2 episodes in a row. And The Yard is pretty good about keeping everyone together as much as possible, but when they have someone missing, they do a really crazy episode to make up for it. And we haven't had to find out what a really crazy episode without Neko would be like, and we haven't had to find out what a really crazy episode without Spooky would be like.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really happy with our like numbers. Like, I know for most people it's like 200, like cringe.
Yeah,
but like I think
off.
relative to the fact that this is one like an NSFW channel, which like will never perform well on social media just because of the fact that algorithms hate NSFW, advertisers hate NSFW, a good portion of the internet pretends to hate NSFW, and like, you know, especially since we're doing like a niche like adult gaming or hentai, which is like also like that's cringe, you know, and it's a podcast, which is also just sort of one of those things that like for every good podcast there are 100 podcasts that never make it past like 5 episodes. Like I said, like you said, like I'm really happy with how consistent we've been. It's also been a nice thing for me. So I started my PhD earlier this year, which is a lot of work, and it has negatively interfered with my streaming. In that, like right now, I haven't streamed in like a month because I was just like I have so many papers to write. Sorry, guys. And so having the podcast has been a nice way to still like keep producing a form of content, even if it isn't streaming right now. And it kind of keeps me connected to like Lewd Neko as like a character or a persona, so I don't feel like, oh, I haven't done this in so long whenever I do have a chance to stream again.
Yeah, and it's connecting with your audience, and they know that you're alive and that you exist, and you might come back later and stuff like that. Which, you know, I think is important. One of the reasons why I like doing the podcast is that I get to exist as a person. As far as THM is concerned, all of the people behind THM have been pretty secret's not like the right word, but just like not very public facing. When we started out with Cubes, who was going to be like one half of the whole studio, Cubes basically just ran stuff in the Discord, but even then she was pretty aloof and like not super contactable by the public. And then, because this podcast shows up in year 3 of THM's life cycle, the the game development business basically ran faceless for a long time, and people knowing that like Cubes had left, people didn't really know who I was in relation to building everything. We brought on a bunch of new artists, which again, people I guess don't know super much about, and being able to exist and people see that and see what I'm doing and what kind of takes I have on things and talking about how the games and stuff are made, I think adds a lot of value in. I'm not some ridiculous faceless healthcare CEO. I'm actually just a broke dude like everyone else. I like to jerk my shit like everyone else. I play a lot of games in the industry as both for fun, because that's great, and also for research so that I know what other people are enjoying and how can I distill that and try and make something that can compete. Like the goal is to make something that people love as much as Food on Wall, love as much as Tales of Androgyny. And just being one guy that hires a couple of artists and some writers and stuff like that is really hard. But it doesn't mean that we don't try and we don't work really hard to, deliver to the patrons that we do have, deliver to the people that do enjoy coming and playing our games, and deliver to the people that like listening to the podcast. So I think all of that stuff is really interesting. Because I'm sure there's people that just come and listen to the podcast and don't engage with any of the games, or like I'm sure there's some Lewd Neko fans that are like, oh cool, they played a game that Neko didn't stream and I'm interested in hearing her take on something, and then came and watched the podcast one time and then it showed up in the recommended later where we're talking about some unhinged content and they're like, oh, that sounds kind of cool. And so the podcast in itself has become an entity and a vehicle for us to muck around and do these cool things. And I kind of appreciate that it exists just for that. Like, it doesn't necessarily need to be this crazy marketing asset that it was kind of planned to be on the outright, and it doesn't need to be some fucking like a lot of the streamer podcasts is all about monetizing their audience through a Patreon and having like exclusive episodes and all this kind of stuff. And look, that would be lovely if we could just do the podcast and live off that, and sign me up if that's the case. And I don't think that's going to happen, but it doesn't mean that we can't, have a lot of fun making it and goofing around and just getting to play with these things for our cool audience. That's right, you listener, you are cool.
One way I also kind of think about it, and I encourage all content creators, streamers to think about it is this way: is like each number you are seeing is a physical human being. Like, we have 200 subscribers. That's 200 people who care about the dumb shit I have to say on a weekly basis. Or even for like low performing views, like 40 doesn't sound like a lot when it's just a number, but if you imagine 40 people in a room listening to you talk, like some people will literally go their entire lives without ever experiencing that. Much less when you start thinking about views that are in 200 people or 500 people or 1,000 at our biggest video. It's something when I started off as a streamer, like I never really had plans of like, oh, I'm going to be super popular, I'm going to make my living off of this. But it's something you still think about, is like, especially like in my early streams where I was literally only streaming to like 5 people. And I was like, hey, those are 5 people who have decided to sit down and listen to me read some silly game. So, not all of us are going to ever make it to the hundreds of thousands that the select few of content creators get to. But I don't think that means that having lower numbers is like automatically worthless. If you care in some way about the content you're creating, keep doing what you're doing. Try your hardest. Make the stuff that makes you happy. And if it stops making you happy, then don't make that stuff anymore.
That's right. The whole point of art is it's like a transference of joy, right? I've talked about this before, but it's like we toil and work and create all of these cool things, and in some cases suffer, in some cases, have to make hard choices and put things together to make everything come together and work. Oftentimes with stuff like a game studio, it's like a really financial juggling to make everything come together, because we have to pay an artist so that they can live and enjoy and make the art that comes together to make the product, so that you can spend $5 and buy the game and play it forever. And all of those kind of things is us working and toiling so that we can create something for you to enjoy. And whether or not that's, blows up and a million people see it, or one person enjoys it the amount that a million people would nonchalantly engage with it, it doesn't matter. Like, the whole point of creating art is the promise of maybe making the world a little bit better. A lot of the stuff that THM does is like really trans focused narratives, gender bending and like feminization and a lot of that kind of stuff. And kind of the core message behind it all is like, it is okay to just not be cis and get wrapped up in this ridiculous adventure and kind of find yourself and be something else other than what everyone's told you. Regardless of how ridiculously magical or gigantic girl cocks are involved, it's still like the core of the message is there, right? It's basically, it's cool to be the truest you, and I think that's kind of radical these days. But sometimes it means that people complain. We got our first death threat on itch.io recently,
Oh no.
which was really funny. Because it's like, of all the places that you come and send something, this is the one where I just have the absolute most power to block you and ignore you and never think about it again. Because it was just like a comment on the game, and it was like, Fuda on male sub, kill yourself, or some stupid shit like that. And I'm like, okay, that's great. And then they like followed up about it later, and it's just like, look, I don't care. Obviously, enough people enjoy this for that not to be a problem, and all of this kind of stuff. And I think it's funny. Like, surely it's some kind of achievement that you've just reached enough people to finally find a hater that hates you enough, hates me. Like, what the fuck have I really done? I haven't accomplished anything for someone to care that much about my existence, which I think is really funny. But it's nice to look back on stuff like the podcast and go, well, actually, maybe we have kind of accomplished something, in our hard work in putting it together and getting this far and keeping it alive and still enjoying it. Like, with the stuff that we have queued and planned coming up in interviews or in games that we're going to play and ideas and stuff that we have, it means that we're not struggling. We're not, running on coals, where we still have things to do and cool stuff to do. So I think next year will be exciting because we'll have a lot of, stuff going on. Maybe we'll have a little break over December. That's why we've recorded a few in advance. And then we can come back January, stuff in the tank, exciting things to do, queue up some stuff. Maybe some cool games will come out in that time. And then you'll have a brand new, exciting, sexy business podcast waiting for you in 2025, which I'm excited about. I'm sure Neko is excited about as well. But if you, loyal viewer, 32 minutes and 30 seconds into this video, are also excited about this, you know what you got to do. You got to click the like button. You got to click the subscribe button, because it means we get the happy Neko. You can't see it, but under that tight business collar is a bell. And when you hear the bell ringing, that means we have a happy cat in the office. And let me tell you, that is what we want. So please hit all the good buttons, and also comment. Tell us what some of your favorite moments throughout the year have been, because that might be the thing that motivates us to make more of that kind of content. Like, if you type in there, you're like, oh my god, I really liked it when you guys played Flip Witch because horny Metroidvanias are actually the only thing that makes me come. Maybe we'll have a look at some of the other ones, because there's a lot, actually. There's like 5 at least, I'm guessing. And, we can do tangents and we can look into that kind of stuff based on your requests. We are slaves to you, according to the algorithm. So please help us out. Get us some exciting stuff to work on next year. And then next week, we'll be seeing you on another cool, funky episode of the Sexy Business Podcast.
Bye-bye.